about. But if you would turn to Genesis 11 with me. Sorry, man, I'm constantly studying my Bible. And I could pull out my app, but I don't want to do that. All right, Genesis 11:10. From Shem to Abraham. I'm not going to read this. It's just a genealogy. All right, so we're gonna do a shortcut, and you can throw that up there. All right, so this is a genealogy. This is basically what you'll be reading if you read that. And we're going to follow that line of Shem down to Arphaxad, which is a name that's available. If any of you have any sons, you don't know what to name. Shelah, Eber, Peleg, Reu, Serug, Nahor, Terah, and then Abraham. Then we start seeing names that we know. But that's basically what we would have read in Genesis 11. This line that goes down to Abraham. And that's actually, if you don't know, Shem, that's where the term Semite came from. It was Shemite, like of Shem. That's where that came from. So if you would, I'm going to read out of Acts 7. We're just going to skip from Genesis to Acts. I just feel like it was taking me way too long to get there. And then we'll finish real quick because everyone's like, man, what about Revelation? Don't we need to be doing that? That always happens, man. I was a youth pastor, and like these kids who are like, I don't even know if they were like saved yet, and they'd be like, hey, I have some questions about the Bible. And you're like, oh, that's so awesome, you're reading your Bible. They're like, Revelation. And I'm like, what are you doing reading Revelation? You don't even know anything yet. And they're like, and then I would just be like, it's all true. It's all true. So you want me to pray with you? So Acts 7 to... All right, Acts 7. To this he replied, brothers and fathers, listen to me. The God of glory appeared to our father Abraham while he was still in Mesopotamia, before he lived in Haran. Leave your country and your people, God said, and go to the land I will show you. So he left the land of the Chaldeans and settled in Haran. After the death of his father, God sent him to this land where you are now living. So it says that God appeared to Abraham in Ur, the land of the Chaldeans, and told him to leave his country and his people and go to the land he would show him. And it says he left the land of the Chaldeans and settled in Haran. So let's talk about the city of Ur, this land that he left. Okay, so this area down here in this circle, I drew this map yesterday and colored it best I could. These red little dots over here, or I guess it's a dotted line, that's Ur. And I think when we picture cities in the Bible, I do the same thing. We picture cities in the Bible. We picture the land of Ur. I'm not sure it doesn't really look like a city in our mind. We picture these little huts, right? And we're like, okay, a city. But actually, they've actually excavated the walls of Ur. And this is a picture I took. I only had black and white camera at the time. But so you can actually see the walls are pretty high. I think you can go to the next one. And this is actually not a picture of someone really living there. They just kind of took pictures to show how big it was for scale. So this city, yeah, thanks, sounds good. This city is like pretty massive. Okay, I think when we picture where we live, there's no modern conveniences, and in fact, there probably isn't really a big difference in our mind between living in a city and wherever God sends Abraham, right? We're just like, oh, he's just going to like a place of sand to a place of sand, right? Pretty much. It's like, okay, God, sure, that sand over there, let's do it. But that's not an accurate picture of Ur. Ur was a wealthy metropolis, if you will. They found elaborate systems of writing, educational facilities. They found mathematical genius, detailed business records, highly practiced religious life. And archaeologists, like they always are, have been astounded to find that many of these ancient cultures were far more developed than we realized. Ur is a city. It's a high-energy, well-developed urban city. In fact, they even found this there. It's just, yeah. You could still, even in that time, guys, you could taste the chemicals, okay? And they were still slow in the drive-through. But in the middle of this city, that's not real, just in case sometimes you got to say that. There's a pyramid-type ziggurat that is Ur's central worship center. Do you guys remember what a ziggurat looks like? Yes, we saw a picture of it. And this is a picture I took of a lady walking to it. I don't know what she hoped to accomplish there, but this is pretty big. This is where like their worship center, and there's some bad things going on there. They're worshiping the moon god. I actually picture like, I don't know why. I don't know what movie I saw, but it was some where they did like a human sacrifice and they would like cut off the head and it would roll down the steps. And that's what I imagined. So you can imagine that too. You're welcome. But the moon god they worshipped was called Ilah or Allah. Okay, the name Allah actually shows up in Arabic writings prior to Islam. Muhammad just took this god whom the people already worshipped in a polytheistic society and made it monotheistic. Okay, so in excavations, they've also found this harp. It's a beautiful, beautiful harp, which this head of a bull, which is actually used, which is Baal. And when they found this wonderful, wonderful harp, it was surrounded by 10 female bodies adorned in jewelry that they believe were human sacrifices. And I guess that they were there to play the harp in the afterlife, and they couldn't decide who was the best. So they put all 10 of them in, and someone would have been like, I'm not that good. I'm really not. I don't need to be there. But so there was this religious life that was kind of, I mean, to me, scary. I mean, imagine heads rolling down stairs. Not a good thing. Now, we don't really know too much about Abram, who's the same as Abraham, just in case you didn't know that. We don't know much about his family prior to this encounter with God. We know God called him, but we don't really know what he was like prior to that. But several resources do suggest that Terah, his father, Sarai, his wife, and Haran, his brother, were all named after the moon god. Because that's what you did in that time. You named them after your god. And they're named after the moon god or his associates or his subordinates. So his family tree is actually grown out of these idol roots. I think we like to think like, oh, they were already being Christians, living outside and being like, oh, not I, you know? But we don't necessarily know that. Like they were fully engrossed in the culture around them. We have no reason to believe that he was actually looking for another god, right? We don't know how separate he was or how apart he was living. I mean, he could have been just like everyone else. Maybe he was just wondering, is there something else? Is there something else? And you might wonder, I mean, this kind of seems really crazy to us that Abraham would call him, that God would call Abraham, right? And not knowing where Abraham is. Right? And it's like, why would God call Abraham? If he's really like everyone else, why would God call Abraham? But we're seeing even now, like people in Iran are having these encounters with Jesus. There's so many stories of people being like, I want to know if this Jesus is real. Jesus, are you real? And they're like, he appeared to me in a dream, or he appeared to me and said something. Like they received Jesus without ever being witnessed to. Right? They're encountering Jesus. There's another story of this man, I believe he was in Africa, and he said, it was a long time ago, and he said, God, if you're real, I want to know you. And he had this dream of these like smokestacks and these towers with smoke coming out of them, and God told him to go to this area on the coast, and he goes to the area on the coast, and right when he gets there, there's this ship that's pulling up, and there's these missionaries coming to the shore on a boat from this big ship, and this ship has 2 smokestacks with smoke coming out of them. And he received Jesus right there. And so God, this isn't something that God's not still doing. God does this. God calls people, right? And so why would he choose Abraham? If Abraham wasn't really looking for God, if Abraham wasn't special, or what was special about him. But if we read in Genesis 12:4, when God says, leave your country, your people, and your father's household, and go to the land I'll show you, in verse 4 it says, so Abram left. He left, just as the Lord had told him. So why Abram? Maybe because he would go. Because he is the one who would go. What if Abraham doesn't go? What if he chooses not to go? Do we have like Judaism, right? Are the Israelites created, right? Is Jesus born? Is David alive? Like, do those things happen? Would Jesus come and die on the cross for our sins? And the answer is yeah. because God is behind it, right? Because God, if you look at this out of context, it's not really a big deal, right? A man moves from a sandy place to a sandy place, right? A man moves from here to there. He moves out of the city to the country. But this small, insignificant little event is filled with great purpose. Like, he doesn't tell Abram what he's going to do. He hasn't given him this promise. He hasn't said, man, I'm going to make you a great nation. All these things are going to happen. He says, leave your people and go to a place I will tell you. And this little event has great purpose for the entire human race. Great purpose for the entire human race because God is in it, because God was behind it. If Abraham doesn't answer the call of God, if he says, no, I'm not going to go, this stuff still happens just with someone else. God says, then I will choose someone who will go. If you will not go, I will choose someone who will go because God doesn't need us. He invites us to be a part of what he's doing. And God is always doing something. God is always doing something. Great and exciting things are happening. The course of history has been changed and will continue to be changed. People are healed and set free. People's pasts are erased and their futures are being rewritten, and we can be a part of it, or we can simply not go. We can simply say, that's a little too much. Lord, I don't know if you got the right person. God is looking for people who will be obedient. Who will be obedient when he tells them to do something. We are also called out of out of the world. And many of us, many Christians, don't go. We don't go. Maybe we're living in and we're like, maybe I can be a missionary to the people of right? I'll stay here and I'll do what you've called me to do, but I'm going to do it here, right? Because it's so hard to leave behind all that comes with that, right? Because you have to leave so many things behind, and maybe we love those things. Maybe we cherish those things. Maybe we're happy where we're at. But when God calls us out, we have to leave things behind, things that are important to us, things that are important to us. Reputation, money, friends, loved ones. And for what? For what? Because we like to analyze things. We like, okay, let's look at the pros and cons. Let me make a pros and cons list, right? Of why I should date Rachel or not, right? Friends joke. But right, we do like pros and cons. Why should I? Why not? And like, what's the pro? What's the pro? Right? God said. That's the pro, because he doesn't know the pros yet. That's how it works. We can know all the cons. We can look and see all the reasons not to, but when you're following God, he's not going to tell you the pros. Other than being in his will and being used by him and trusting him, right? Like, and so many people, like, I see it all the time. People like step away from the world. They're like, God's calling me to do this thing. I'm doing it. I'm stepping out. And then a week later, they're like, nothing's really happening. Nothing's really exciting. God told me to take this job. I took this job and I haven't even been promoted yet, right? I'm kind of doing the things no one wants to do, right? I don't really like any of my coworkers. None of them are saved. And so I've decided I'm going to quit my job, right? And you're like, that's why you never have a job. No, you have to wait. You have to wait and see what God is going to do. It's going to take longer than a week. But this is the assurance. This is the pro. This is the pro, guys. Put it on your list of pros. If God's called you out of something, if he's called you from something, he's called you to something. He doesn't just say, come out of there and you're just going to come with me and like, I'm just going to kind of leave you here. He says, come out of there because we've got somewhere to go. There is a destination in mind. I have something for you. There will be changes and there may be things that you lose and give up. But if you're coming out, if you're stepping out, if you are obeying, if you are coming from, then he most certainly has a place to go to. He has a place to take you to, right? And let me tell you, it might be a hard walk. You will lose things. You will lose people that you cared about. But the place that he's taking you to is better. It's hard to believe it sometimes, and you'll never see it till you're there, but the place that he wants to take you to is better than the place that you're coming out of. And before Abram even leaves, before he hears God say, come out, God has already been at work in his life. And God is already at work in your life before you're even ready to go. You see, we know God called Abraham to leave his country and his family behind, to go to an unspecified place, which we know later to be Canaan. But let's look at how this works itself out. Okay, to do this, we're going to go back and look at the verses just before where God calls him out. And it's in Genesis 11:31. It says, Terah took his son Abram, his grandson Lot, son of Haran, and his daughter-in-law Sarai, the wife of his son Abram, and together they set out from Ur of the Chaldeans to go to Canaan. But when they came to Haran, they settled there. Terah lived 205 years, and he died in Haran. So here we see that Abraham's father actually takes the entire family out of Ur and moves them to Haran. And there's a picture of their wonderful, wonderful trip. And they have different ideas about which route he might have taken or route. And I believe, the scholar that I am, think they took the south one along the Euphrates, if you will. And so they stop right at the top of that big curve. There's that is Haran. That's where they stop. It's basically halfway. He goes with his entire family, and his dad kind of leads the expedition, and they go halfway. And it's entirely possible that God set this up so that he would have family go with him halfway, right? Because God knows us. He knows Abraham's fears just as he knows ours. He knows our hang-ups. He knows that sometimes we need help, right? Sometimes we need help. And often when we first start walking with God or we start stepping out, he brings people like you guys, to help, right? Maybe God is helping Abraham take these baby steps to get him where he wants to be. Like he's called him step out in faith, and he's stepped out in faith, but there's always this other moment where God says, that was awesome. I think we think like, okay, I stepped out in faith. I did what God wanted me to do. I'm successful. I'm a successful Christian. Awesome. And then God's like, okay, step out again. And you're like, well, we just kind of stepped out. I'm not really settled here. Like I put my tent down in this beautiful sandy spot near the Euphrates. You know what I mean? And God's like, well, come out again. And you're like, oh, man, like I feel like you ask a lot. I feel like you want a lot of walking involved, but that's what it is. God is like, okay, you get comfortable. Okay, step out. Step out again. We got somewhere else to go. But you have to remember, the place that you're going to is better than the place that you're coming from. Right? But we cannot go halfway. We can't go halfway. But when they came to Haran, they settled there. They put the tents down, right? They decided to stay. He doesn't go the whole way at first. He stayed in Haran. Why? Well, for one, I'm going to take some more first. This is a dangerous place to live. It's still a dangerous place to live, right? But for a small tribe, living, you don't even know, you're walking through people's territory, right? You're walking through places that they will defend. And you're a small tribe constantly on someone else's property, right? In a foreign land. And they are definitely safer in a large group. The bigger their group, the safer they are. But what other reasons might they have decided to stay in Haran? Well, for Abraham, let's be real. It's going to be hard to leave his family behind. I don't think we truly understand what family was to them, right? Family, if you got married, you lived with your family. And then they'd get married and you lived with your family. And then you'd all live together. Doesn't that sound awesome? I'm trying to bring it back. Right? You all lived together all the time. Right? They eat all their meals together. They work beside each other. They're living life together. They are close. And also they've experienced tragedy Abraham's brother, Haran, which they probably named that place after, died. He died before they left Ur, and he's not listed in the family members that move with Terah, but his son Lot is listed. They didn't mention Lot's father, but they mention Lot, meaning that Haran most likely died before they left. And you can see that it's really a huge family tragedy because the place they stop halfway at, they name after him. He's still on their hearts. He's still on their minds. And I bet it was even harder to leave. I bet it was so hard to leave the only place they knew with him, where their memories were with him. It becomes a thing, right? It's like, oh, I can't, but I feel like we're leaving him behind. I feel like we're leaving the place we knew him. I feel like we're leaving where he's buried. We're leaving, and it's harder. It's harder because you've got all these like heartstrings that are attached to something. And so this family, this is a close family. And we know that Lot must have looked at Abraham like his father because Lot goes with him. We know Lot goes with him. And Lot most likely went with him because of the connection, the deep connection with Abraham over this tragic loss. So this family, they've experienced tragedy together. And nothing brings family together like tragedy. Nothing brings family together like tragedy. I got the closest with my sisters when tragedy happened, right? When we, that's not my notes. Don't go off notes. When my parents got divorced and we kind of moved around and we didn't know anybody and people were mean to us, and like I looked forward to going home and hanging out with my sisters. Like we became really good friends. And that's like up to that point, I hated them. Not Leanne, we were all like cool. But like we became really close. We hung out with each other. We took care of each other. I remember one time on the bus when I went to Edgewood when it was not the school of choice by any means. And like these guys would like kind of pick on me. And like this guy dumped water on my head. And like I was about to get up and like do something. I'm just kidding. I was little and I was in 7th grade and he was a 9th grader, guys. And he already smoked cigarettes on the bus. So you can tell where this guy is. And so my sister gets up and grabs a water bottle and dumps it on his head. And I'm like, yeah. Oh, she loves that story. She's like, and then tell him what I did for you. Tell him what I did. And I'm like, yeah, well, that could have come back on me still because he wasn't going to hit you. I'm like, and, then his sister took care of the guy. You're like, Jenny, No, but my sister also bought me my first car. My sister got it for me. And it wasn't a great car. So I think she could have upped the price a little bit, maybe spent a little bit more money. No, but she got in a car accident and she got like $1,000 payment and she used that payment to get me a car. Like we became close because of tragedy. And God says, he doesn't just say we focus on the leave behind the land, but not so much the family. He's got to leave them behind. And it takes his father dying to finally get up and go. There's a million more reasons to stay. They aren't really settled yet. They haven't established themselves, right? Like he's leaving people behind who might need help, right? They could have used his help. Or maybe I should just stay until father passes and then I can go. I'm going to wait. Remember that when the guy says to Jesus, I want to follow you, but first let me bury my father. Right? Now we think, how heartless. I mean, most scholars think that his father wasn't like getting ready to be buried. He was like, let me kind of, when my dad passes away, then I'll follow you. And Jesus said, no, now. It's also entirely possible that Abraham talked them into leaving Ur with him. He was like, hey guys, oh dad, there's this great plot of land. And I want you to go with me. I mean, they could have been so close that when Abraham's like, I'm determined to go, then dad's like, okay, then I'm going to get the family up and we're going to go. And sometimes we're the same way, right? Because when God's like, hey, I want you to do something. I want you to do this thing. We're like, all right, I'm going to get everybody to go with me. I'm going to get all my friends to go with me. But we have to be very careful who we take on our pilgrimage. Like if we need people to go with us, like they can mess up the whole thing. We can make a great start from Ur. But if we need Terah, then we're going to eventually stop. when Tara decides to stop. We have to be aware of that spirit of compromise to stay where loved ones bid us to stay. Because they could be like that, be like, I'm going to go with you in this Christian thing. I'm going to follow God. But let's not go to extremes. Let's not go to extremes. We don't have to do all that. We can still kind of fit. We can still kind of live both lives and fit in, right? I'll go to church with you. I'll go to church with you. I'm willing to accompany you on your pilgrimage, on your journey, but only if we go as far as Haran. Only if we go that far. And that can be more dangerous than outward opposition, right? Because if people are like, oh, you're going to do that? That's stupid. You're just like, well, I'll show you. I'm following God, and you're going to look stupid, Because that's a biblical way to view that. No, but we do. We're just like, if there's opposition, we can recognize that's opposition. That is opposition. And I can stand in the face of opposition. But when people who are allies are people who are like, we're going with you, but let's just kind of temper where we're at. Let's just I remember when I first got saved, man, the people, well, actually, it's a long story. I'll get into it one day. But my friends and I, we were huge druggies in high school, and we got saved. We went to like a Ron Luce, forget what it was called. Acquire the Fire, ATF. Yeah, you know what's up. We all acquired it. Successful stories of ATF, Acquire the Fire. Or alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. And I was a druggie, and I got saved. And I would go into schools, and I would tell everyone, hey, man, we used to do so many drugs, but God saved me. And my friends started being like, hey, lay off on the telling everybody we did drugs. But I'm like, well, we're not planning on doing it again, right? I've been saved. And little by little, my friends started getting picked off, I guess, by the devil. And they would get back into it. And then it was just me. And it was lonely. And so I fell back into it. But later when I got saved on my own, first thing I wanted to do was get them saved because I love them. And I'm just like, I want them to be saved. I want you to know what I have. I want you to be redeemed like I am. I want you to know the joy that I have. And I kept trying. And they would they're just like, I'll go to church with you. But then it's always like, well, not Sunday night and Wednesday night. Sunday morning. I'm not going to the Bible study, and it just kept but they kept being like, oh man, I wish you would just kind of do this stuff with us. Cause man, I really miss you, man. And they pour on like your relationship's built on drugs and you can't really appreciate each other unless you're high. And I just there was a point where I was like, I've got to let them go. I have to let you guys go. You're holding me back. If you're not coming with me, then I have to go. And still I'll see them. I saw one at a wedding a long time ago, and he was all messed up, and he was like, man, I remember he named the year, and he was like, that was the year that you left us all behind. And I was like, I don't know how to reply to that. I was like, yeah, but I did the right thing because look where I am. And I was just like, that's funny. I didn't realize it broke their hearts like it broke my heart. It broke my heart. I didn't know the year like you knew the year, but it was just but because God moved me on. It broke my heart for a little while. But then God brought me with a place with better friends and people who are actually seeking God, right? Many Christians, we only go halfway. You can look around, Christians, we're only going halfway. We're settling for Haran. And the thing that keeps us in Haran, the thing that keeps us halfway is not opposition. It's other Christians. It's other Christians. We like to hang in the middle of the pack. We look around at what others are doing and we do that. We stop. We don't go all the way. I remember when I did first become a Christian and I left my other friends behind, I started to hang out with other Christians who had been saved. I met them at church. They had been saved longer than I had. They'd been attending church longer than I had. And I assumed that they knew more than I did, that they cared more than I did, that their relationship with God was much stronger than mine, that they were more spiritually mature. I just assumed those things. And I thought, okay, so if they're doing that, it's okay for me to do it. I guess there's some scripture about that's okay. right? And so I would just do the things they did because I just assumed they knew Jesus longer and better. But we can't take our cues from other Christians. We can't take our cues from other Christians. Just because someone has the label, I know y'all know this, just because someone has the label as Christian doesn't mean that they are pursuing God or in relationship with Him. It does not mean they are pursuing God or in relationship with Him. I have my sister's father-in-law, we had lunch the other day, and he was telling me they're actually witnessing to Syrian refugees in Lebanon. And I'm like, you go, brother. I'm so glad God hasn't called me that. And he's like, I've stopped saying I'm a Christian because they have this impression of Christians. And they say, are you a Christian? He's like, no, I'm not a Christian. I'm a follower of Christ. I'm a follower of Christ because it's different. It's different. Just because people are labeled as Christians doesn't mean they're pursuing God. It doesn't mean they're in a relationship with Him. But sometimes that's all we're looking for. That's all we're looking for. Oh, you're a Christian? Okay, good. Then I can do what you're doing. Because we're looking for an excuse, right? We're looking for a way out. We want a reason to stay. Give me a reason to stay, please. Working with youth, I remember, it's hard to find someone, and I don't know if it gets any easier at high school, it's hard to find someone that is serious about their relationship with God. It's hard. It's hard to find someone that is serious about God. If you're serious about God, to find someone as serious as you are about God. And I would watch these girls, and they would be like, oh my gosh, I just love that guy. He is such a good Christian. He is the best Christian I've ever seen. You don't even know. Like when he plays football, he wears a cross on his neck, and every touchdown he scores, he points at the sky. This guy, and I'm just like, wow, is that I'm like, look, that guy, I can guarantee you he's not a Christian, okay? I can guarantee you that he's not a Christian just because he has a cross on his neck and points to the sky every time he scores a touchdown. Everybody knows you get on one knee like Tebow. That guy's saved, okay? If you're praying in front of everybody, you go, right? Right? And his faith is still strong after being dropped by the Jaguars. That's okay. He's going to get picked up, guys. He's going to get picked up. Don't worry about it. Right? But we're always looking for a reason to stay. We can't look for a reason to stay. We can't stay in the middle of the pack. We can't look around at other Christians and say, well, this is where all of Christendom is, then I'm safe. Because sometimes it's really more about safety and security of okay, I'm going to heaven. I'm better than this person. I'm not as good as this person. But that's not what God has called us to. That's not where God has called us to. He's called us to a better place. We've got to stop looking around at who's around us and what they're doing and start looking up. The only way that you are going to find what God has for you is to walk with Him and get close to Him. You're not going to find what God has for you hanging in the middle of the pack. You're going to have to go out on your own to see what God has specifically for you. And you're going to have to trust Him, but He will show it to you. He will show it to you every time. You're going to have to trust Him. And the more you trust Him, the more He's going to show you that He can be trusted and that He is good. Right? You have to know that when He calls you from a place, stop looking at all that you're leaving behind and say, if God's called me from this, I am leaving behind so much that I love, and it's so hard to leave, but God's called me from it. So the only guarantee you have is this place is better. The place He's going to take you to is way better than the place He's taken you out of. Right? And there might be some bumps along the road, but He will bring people to help, and you will see His glory, you will see His majesty, you will experience His presence, just like we'll see Abram encounters God in so many ways that are just supernatural and amazing, and he never would have seen God that way if he had not left. If we skip ahead real quick to Genesis 13 and verse 4, it says, and where he built an altar. Verse 14. He built an altar unto the Lord. And the Lord said to Abram, after Lot had parted from him, He tells him, lift up your eyes. Lift up your eyes from where you are and look north and south, east and west. All the land that you see, I will give to you and your offspring forever. I will make your offspring like the dust of the earth, so that if anyone could count the dust, then your offspring could be counted. Go, walk through the length and breadth of the land, for I am giving it to you. But he starts out, lift up your eyes. Lift up your eyes from where you are. Lift up your eyes from where you are. In the original translation, the Hebrew word that's translated as now, because it's lift up now thine eyes, is more, it's closer rather than now, it's closer to please. Please. Not lift up your eyes now, it's more like a plea. Please. Lift up your eyes, please. Lift up your eyes. It's like a strong affirmation. He's deeply urging Abram, he's deeply urging his child to believe him. God, the God of the universe, is urging his child, please, please believe me. Please believe me and lift up your eyes from where you are and look around. This is yours. This is yours. Please believe me when I tell you that. It doesn't look like it now, but I've said it, and so it's done. God is urging us. He's urging us. He's not that God that's like, you don't believe me, you don't want to follow, okay, you're done. He's like, please believe me. Believe me. He's not like, if you don't want to believe me, I don't care. It's your loss. It's your loss. He says, please believe me. Do you realize that God, by creating us, he placed his heart at the risk of loss for the first time? For the first time, he places his heart at the risk of loss. When we choose not to believe God, when we choose not to follow him, we all lose. None of his authority, none of his glory is lost, but our part in his plan is lost. And before God made us, he really had nothing to lose. But in creating us, he has something to lose. He's at the risk of losing us, of losing those that he loves, of losing the ones that he loves forever because they choose it, because we choose it, right? It says over and over that God was grieved. God was grieved. It says when he looked down at Sodom and Gomorrah, he was grieved, right? He seems to be constantly grieving the loss of those that he loves, and we choose it. We choose it, not God. God is like, please lift up your eyes and believe me. Lift up your eyes and believe me. As God says to Abram, imagine God saying to each one of us, will you please, will you now, will you believe me? Will you please believe me? Don't miss out on the plan that I have for you. Will you please just believe me? Will you please just trust me? Will you trust me? Now, and what will Abraham miss out on? In Genesis 12, 2 and 3, God says, I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I'll bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all people on earth will be blessed through you. He will miss out. If he does not follow God, he will miss out on the blessing and the promise of God. He's going to miss out on everything. And we will too if we settle for the middle of the pack, if we settle for this safe place. There are so many people in this book whose names aren't even mentioned. Their names are forgotten, right? They're nobodies. Don't forget, don't miss this fact that we just were studying the Tower of Babel, where what did they want to do? They wanted to make a name for themselves. They wanted to make a name for themselves, and so they set out working to create a name for themselves. And here God says what? He says, I will make your name great. I will make you a name. It's not in your work. It's not who you are and what you've done. I will be the one to make your name great. So many people in this Bible, their names are forgotten. They're like the townsfolk, the villagers. There's a man asked a question, a lawyer asked a question, right? They're like right next to the living God. They're right next to the Son of God, and they miss out on it. They settle in Haran. They settle for halfway. And we don't know their names. And you know why? Because they're not important. They're not important. They didn't do anything. They missed it. There were people living in Ur at the time that Abraham was there, and they are powerful people. They are important people. They are looked up to by everyone, all the Chaldeans. They just want to be them. They have all the power. They're beautiful. They're like the beautiful people. And now we don't even know their names. They're just part of a land that Abraham left behind, because power and authority and a name is granted by God and God alone. not by us. Don't settle for halfway. We get lost in moments. We settle for moments in temporary joys. And we miss out on eternity. We miss out on grand plans. But just like Abraham, we've been called by name. He has called you by name out of the city, out from people, and into a greater blessing. And many of us have answered that call, but we have to ask ourselves, even if we've answered that call, we have to ask ourselves, am I still being obedient? Yes, I got saved. I was obedient once. Am I still being obedient? Have I continually stepped out in faith? Am I on my way to the promised land? Or have I settled here? Am I comfortable? Have I settled where I am comfortable? Right? Was leaving friends behind too much? And let me just tell you something. It's never too late to leave Haran. So often I think we hear sermons like this and we think, if I had done this differently, if this had gone differently, and we look back at all the reasons we've stopped or what could have been different and why we can't move on and why it's too late for us, why it's too late for our walk with God, why it's too late for our careers, why it's too late for our family. I'm a horrible dad. I've been a horrible dad. There's no way I can repair that. There's nothing that I can do. That ship has sailed. That journey is done. I missed that moment. The moment is gone. But God is not about moments. God's about eternity. And God can do anything. It says in Genesis 12:4, Abraham was 75 years old when he set out for Haran. And throughout the Bible, we see God call people out to fulfill their destiny. He uses them mightily when they are too old, when it's too late, when they've given up, when it's all over. That's when God's like, it ain't nothing yet. We haven't even started. It's never too late. God's promises do not fail. His word will not return void. This covenant with Abraham has been extended to us. The word Old Testament, New Testament, that word that they've translated as testament is actually covenant. Old covenant, new covenant. Right? And it's hard for us to understand that term covenant. It seems like an agreement, right? Or a contract. But it meant so much more to the Jews when you said the word covenant, because when God speaks, it becomes law. When God speaks, it becomes law. But not as we see laws, because we see laws that can be broken. But think of this. When he created the world, when he spoke things into existence, he created laws. He created laws of nature. He made it so. And those laws of nature cannot be broken. Gravity is a law of nature that was spoken into existence by the word of God. And we cannot undo it. We cannot undo it. We cannot make it so that it isn't so. And that is what a covenant is when God speaks it. We cannot make it so that it is not so. It is a law. It was said, and thus it is done. It's been said, it is done. And God lowers himself to create a covenant with us that says, I will bless you. And I said it, it is done. I said it, it's done. You're blessed. I have called you out. I said I've got somewhere for you to go to. It is done. It's done. Nothing can change it. What I say is law. And you cannot undo God's calling on your life just as much. You cannot undo the law of gravity. And he still has plans for you. We have an inheritance. We have a blessing. We have a promise from the living God. So let's pack our stuff because we're leaving. We're leaving the land of mediocrity. We're not going to be Christians that go halfway. We're going to get uncomfortable. We're going to get uncomfortable. But when we leave, the place that God has for us, the place that he's taking us to, is far better. It's far better. And we're not going to be a people who hangs back. We're not going to be a people who sits halfway. We're going all the way to what God has for us, because that is where we experience the glory of God and the peace that passes all understanding. That is where we see God move. That's where we experience the blessing, and I want it. That's what I want. Who wants that? Who wants that? So let's go. Let's get up and let's just worship God for who he is. And no matter what you're going through, we're going to praise him because he's got somewhere to take us to. He's got somewhere for each one of us. And he loves you, and he set a promise over your life, and that cannot be undone.